It was supposed to be just another routine flight. Passengers boarded, found their seats, and prepared for takeoff. The crew went through security checks. The cabin was filling up with travelers, and the buzz of pre-flight activity was in full swing. Among the passengers was a man dressed simply, in a tracksuit, his hood pulled up just above his head. He had a thick beard. His expression was calm but focused, and he held himself with a quiet confidence most people wouldn't notice at first glance. To him, this was just another flight, another trip he had done countless times before. But today, he was about to encounter something completely unexpected. The flight attendants moved quickly around the cabin, helping passengers, checking luggage compartments, and making sure everything was in order. There was one particular flight attendant who took her job very seriously. She took pride in maintaining order, making sure everyone on board adhered to airline policy, and more importantly, identifying anything or anyone that seemed wrong. She had worked long enough to develop an instinct for troublemakers, or so she thought. As she walked down the aisle, her gaze fell on a man in a tracksuit. There was something about him that struck her as suspicious. He wasn't causing any disturbance, wasn't acting inappropriately, wasn't even looking around anxiously like someone who might be nervous before a flight. But something about his appearance made her feel uneasy. The hood, the beard, the way he sat quietly, almost too quietly, as if trying not to attract attention. She'd seen it before. People who wanted to avoid, people who didn't belong here. And in her mind, it fit the profile of someone she needed to keep an eye on. She took a step forward, clearing her throat loudly, as if signaling her presence. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice sounding commanding. "May I see your boarding pass?" The man looked up. His dark eyes met hers with calm curiosity. There was a brief pause. Without hesitating, he reached into his pocket and handed her a small piece of paper. The expression on his face was impenetrable. She took it, quickly ran her eyes over it, but something still didn't sit right in her head. He had a valid place, everything checked out, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't supposed to here. "Is there a problem?" he asked in an even voice that didn't have an ounce of worry or irritation in it. She hesitated a moment. She had no real reason to insist, but something inside her was bothering her. Years of working in the aviation industry had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now her instincts were screaming at her. "I need you to get off the plane for further inspection," she said in a firmer tone. Several heads turned from passengers nearby. The man didn't react immediately, but there was a noticeable change in the air. The energy around him changed, though not in a way the flight attendant could have described. It wasn't anger, not nervousness. It was something else, a deep, unwavering confidence, as if he'd been in situations far more intense than this one, and it was nothing more than mild discomfort, but he remained composed. "And why is?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, as if genuinely curious. "I just need to confirm some details," she said, but the uncertainty of her answer didn't go unnoticed. At this point, whispers crept through the cabin. People were attentive now. Some passengers looked around, confused by what was happening. Others craned their necks to get a better view of the unfolding scene. Some even recognized the man and exchanged understanding glances, whispering among themselves. But the steward remained oblivious. "You need to come with me, sir," she insisted, taking a step back and pointing to the front of the plane. For a moment, the man just stared at her. He wasn't angry or argued. He'd seen this kind of situation before, the assumptions, the profiling, the tacit judgments people made without even realizing it. It wasn't new to him. He exhaled slowly and nodded. Good. When he rose from his seat, several people quietly gasped. Those who knew who he was realized that the situation was about to take a steep turn, but the flight attendant still had no clue. She thought she had handled the situation well, that she had identified a potential problem before it could become a problem. What she didn't realize was that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. He walked quietly down the aisle, his steps unhurried. His presence was now attracting attention in a way the flight attendant hadn't expected. More and more people began to whisper, the tension growing more and more intense. As he approached the front of the plane, an older man in a business suit leaned over to the flight attendant and muttered something to her. Her face froze. She blinked, pondering the words, but they didn't seem to be immediately realized. "What?" she asked, and her voice suddenly lost the authority it had just moments ago. The man repeated the same thing, slower this time, as if addressing someone who had just made a serious error in calculation. "Do you have any idea who that is?" The blood rushed from her face. Her gaze flickered to the man standing only a few feet away, the very man she'd just asked to get off the plane, the very man she'd thought suspicious. And then, as if a switch flicked, the realization hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just some random passenger. This wasn't just anyone. This was Khabib Nurmagomedov, the undefeated former UFC lightweight champion, the global sports icon, the man who had never lost a professional fight in his entire career. A man who dominated the world's most brutal sport with unrivaled discipline, power, and unwavering. A man whose name was revered by millions around the world, and she just tried to throw him out of an airplane. A wave of panic swept over at her. Her throat was dry, her palms suddenly clammy. She had made a mistake, a huge mistake. The whispers in the cabin grew louder as more and more passengers began to realize what was happening. Some shook their heads in bewilderment, others watched with amusement, and some even pulled out their phones, already filming what was about to become a viral moment. But Khabib? He never said a word. He stood there, looking at the flight attendant with the same reserved expression, as if waiting to see how she would handle the situation now that she had learned the truth. The power dynamic had completely changed, and she knew it. What happened next left everyone speechless. The moment the realization came to her, the flight attendant was out of breath. She had spent the last few minutes acting on pure assumptions, believing she was exercising her power. But now that she knew the truth, she felt the weight of her mistake pressing down on her like a heavy stone. The passengers watched intently. Some whispered, others waited to see how she would recover from what was now a full-blown embarrassment. She swallowed with difficulty. Her confidence that she had before was all but gone, and tried to keep her voice calm. "Sir, I apologize," she muttered. "There must have been a misunderstanding." Something unreadable flashed across Habib's face, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence alone was enough to make the situation unbearable for her. The tension in the cabin was high, and the longer he stood there, the more the flight attendant felt defenseless. She tried to assert control over him, but realized too late that she had just disrespected a man who commanded the respect of millions. At that moment, the senior flight attendant, an older woman who had probably been in the industry much longer, rushed forward, clearly sensing the gravity of the situation. She leaned over and whispered something urgently in the young flight attendant's ear. The young woman's face turned even redder as her boss gently pushed her aside and stepped forward. "Mr. Nurmagomedov," the older woman smiled politely, stewardess. There was a calm professionalism in her voice that was completely lacking in the younger stewardess. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused. There was absolutely no reason for it. Please return to your seat and we will ensure you have a comfortable flight." Khabib studied her for a moment, then exhaled through his nose as if letting out the remaining frustration. Not that he'd shown it initially. He wasn't the type to make a scene. He'd been through enough in his life to know that some battles weren't fighting. But what he did next took everyone by surprise. Instead of immediately returning to his seat, he shifted his gaze to the young flight attendant, the one who had accosted him, and spoke for the first time since he had stood up. "Tell me something," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "Why did you ask me to leave the airplane?" The question hung in the air, heavy with no answer. The young woman's lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. She couldn't admit the truth, couldn't say out loud that she had judged him only by his looks. She no real reason, no logical explanation, only an inner feeling that led her straight to the worst mistake of her career. "Yeah," she began, but Khabib held up a hand, stopping her. "You don't need to answer that," he said, shaking his head. "I already know." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the cabin felt the weight of his words. It wasn't about getting angry or making a scene. It was about something deeper, the quiet dignity of a man who knew exactly what had just happened but refused to stoop to anger. Khabib didn't wait for an answer. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his seat. His posture was relaxed, his expression impenetrable again. As he sat down, several passengers exchanged glances. Some shook their heads in bewilderment at what had just happened. Some even whispered words of encouragement, recognizing the grace with which he had handled the situation. The younger stewardess remained frozen in place, her humiliation complete. She thought she was in control of the situation, but she had just been trained in the most brutal way. Not with aggression, not with yelling, but with pure composure. But the repercussions didn't end there. The incident quickly spread. The passenger recorded the entire conversation on his phone, and even before the plane landed, the video had already created a sensation on social networks. Within hours, it went viral. The headlines went viral on all platforms. The stewardess tried to kick Khabib out, but immediately regretted it. The undefeated champion remained silent, but his answer speaks for itself. Millions of people watched the footage, shaking their heads at the absurdity of the situation. Comments flooded in. People pointed out the blatant bias of the flight attendant's actions. Many pointed out that Khabib had done absolutely nothing wrong, but he was chosen simply because of the way he looked. Others praised his calm and dignified response, saying it only solidified his legacy as not just a fighter, but a real man of character. The airline, now caught in the abyss of a PR nightmare, had no choice but to respond. An official statement was released within 24 hours, apologizing Khabib for the unfortunate misunderstanding and assuring him that they are taking appropriate measures to ensure that such incidents do not happen again. But the damage had already been done. The young flight attendant, who had been so confident in her credentials just the day before, now found herself under. An investigation began within the airline, and within a week, it was quietly confirmed that she had been suspended. What about Khabib? He has never spoken publicly about this incident. He didn't post about it, he didn't give interviews, he didn't fan the flames of controversy. To him, it was just another moment in a world that often judges too quickly. Another example of why it's always best to stay calm and let actions and dignity speak louder than words. But one thing was clear to everyone who watched the video. The flight attendant thought she was dealing with just another passenger. She had no idea she was facing a legend. And by the time she realized her mistake, it was too late. It was too late.